It's too early to be having heart attacks like this. Got an alert about a half hour ago about a server on one of our remote sites being low on storage. Pulled up WinDireStat, whatever that is, Windows something statistics, to poke around and see if there was anything I knew I could purge. Click on a large folder to see the files inside and my remote access locks up. Must be a lot of stuff in that folder, I'm thinking to myself, before I get completely disconnected. Minor warning bells start going off, but Connective Control isn't perfect software, and I've seen this before, so I wait a second, and then... blip, blip, blip. Other endpoints start going offline. What the hell did I even do? I start thinking to myself. Almost panicking at this point, I swap over to our network controller's access page and pop in on the site. They're completely offline. This actually calmed me down a bit, as there was no way in hell WinDireStat was taking the entire network down, and checking in on another site in the same building confirmed it was a brief outage. By the time I was done in there, all the endpoints were back up already. Too early for that sort of panic, lol. How's everyone else's day been? What's up, guys? Welcome back to Storytime with Uncle Jon. Today we're taking a look at r/Tales from Tech Support. Got a little bit of a head cold starting thanks to all the crumb snatchers that my wife watches during the week. I don't know. It's mid-fall. I should expect it. I don't know why I don't just plan for it every year, because it happens at least twice a year during the spring and fall. Anyway, got an adapter for the external webcam, which is better quality than the laptop webcam. Unfortunately, when the sun's out, it's so bright in here that I have a hard time getting the exposure down enough on that one to actually be able to see anything. It's just so weird. Anyway, figured I'd turn the camera so you got a little bit different view. You can see out the window along the edge of the river here. That's the north side of the river. There's some leaf changes. You can sort of see it. I don't know. That window makes it weird. I'd open it up, except the the sound of the traffic going over the grates on the drawbridge here to my left. They make it pretty much impossible to not get interrupted with them going over the grates. So, blah, blah, blah. Yes, if you're new to this channel, I tend to ramble on. Sometimes my thoughts are connected perfectly. Sometimes they are disjointed and whatever I feel like talking about. Actually, it's not even what I feel like talking about. It's pretty much involuntary at this point. Just like, I don't want to compare it to Tourette's. Those people have a really tough time, but my thought processes get a little jumbled. Duh. Lucky guess or experience? You be the judge. I had a situation today which caused me a little panic until I was able to think about it clearly. One of our website servers, I just remembered what I was trying to tell you about the camera. Oh my god, I'm a dumbass. On one of our website servers, there's a fairly strong and sometimes persnickety caching mechanism. It's so persnickety that when we have to make an edit to a page, such as a blog, we have to be sure to make sure we check the page in incognito mode. Otherwise, if we're logged into the CMS and visit the page in regular mode, the update will appear, but it won't appear for others until the cache is cleared. However, I don't know what the cache retention policy is. Policy? I don't know what the cache retention policy is, so usually we just clear the cache after an update and move on. Today a change was made to a page and it was passed over to me for my QA review. So I checked it in a new incognito session. The update had been made and everything was happy, so I reported up the chain that the update had been verified. About 15 minutes later, the account person responsible for that website chatted me and said that she wasn't seeing the update. She's been bitten with the cache issues before, so when she chatted me, she said that she had tried Chrome in both regular and incognito mode and had also tried Safari. The update wasn't showing up on any of her browser instances. I had someone else double check for me and that person was able to see the updates. It was somewhat reminiscent of a problem I had encountered several years ago when I was at another company. In that instance, we had a weird load balancer situation, and a person would get assigned to one of two load balancer URLs. So instead of randomly getting server 1 or server 2, if you were assigned to server 1, it took a random cosmic event of the universe to get you switched over to server 2. Yeah, I know, that's not how load balancers are supposed to work, but don't care, that was about 8 to 10 years ago. Anyway, I knew that wasn't the issue in this case, because we don't have a load balancer, but something was preventing the user from seeing the updates even though others could see it. We got on a conference call and she even showed me that she was starting with new incognito session. I even had her send me the URL she was using, thinking that maybe there were two instances of this page, but with different URLs. Nope, same URL, new incognito session, hard refreshing 2 or 3 times, update still visible. Visible or invisible? Then she happened to mention, I even tried it on my phone and I'm still not seeing the update. Everything's pointing to a stubborn cache somewhere between her and the website. She's about 175 miles away from me under a different ISP, so we definitely aren't going through the same intermediate hoops. Then I asked her, is your phone going through your home's Wi-Fi? Turns out it was, so she turned off that setting on her phone and hit the page using her phone's data connection. The updates are appearing, how nice. From what I can tell, either her Wi-Fi router modem thingy has some sort of stubborn cache mechanism, or one of the hops she's going through has the stubborn cache. So, lucky guess or experience, you be the judge. Also, does anyone else have any suggestions on how I can check where the cache mechanism could be located? The user on the other end is not technical, so doing a trace cert is really not an option. No idea what 99.9% of that is. I do know that I have been in instances where I have fixed my website, made updates to it, and I can see the updates because I refreshed my browser. I don't think I've ever had to check it in incognito mode. I just, open a new tab and go for it. But there's been instances where other people haven't seen it, and I usually just tell them, whatever, turn it completely off, close it out, restart from scratch, and they'll see it. But usually that takes care of it. So I'm not sure what this guy's even talking about. There's something else out there that I guess I'd never experienced. Oh yeah, just remember what I started telling you about the camera before when I got distracted by the whole window and, exposure thing. Anyway, so I got an adapter for the camera so that I could put it on its own USB. So there's only 3 USB ports on this laptop. I've got the regular old-fashioned USB, I call it A, I don't know. Regular standard old square boxy USB. I believe that's a USB 2.0. Maybe. I'm assuming. I haven't looked at it. Then there's 2 on this side, which are USB-C. And if I'm recording, I really don't want to run off of battery only, so I keep it plugged in. Well, one of those ports has to be used for charging. The other port's open. Well, most of this stuff still comes in regular USB configuration. It doesn't come with USB-C. So I ordered myself an adapter to go from regular USB to USB-C. And so now everything's on its own little port. Don't have to worry about the mouse because evidently I left that sitting at home on my desk. So now I get to edit this whole video using the trackpad on the computer. Not a fan. But anyway, that was the idea telling you before about the camera and the exposure and all that stuff. See? The mind is a terrible thing. They always forget about the IT department. This one is from a few years ago, but I was reminded of it today, so I figured I'd share. My desk used to be near our help desk, which was handy because they could easily come around the corner and ask me questions as needed. It was also a great spot for listening for drama going on. One day I'm working and hear one of our guys talking with a client. Everything was going fine until I hear him ask, "Wait, aren't we in the same building? Call me back later if you're still having issues." He hung up and let us know that his caller had said her building was being evacuated because of a bomb threat. Then he realized that we're all in the same building. No one had alerted us yet. We were standing there trying to figure out if we should evacuate too when I look over and see people streaming out of the fire exit just outside our office, and suggested we do the same. Everything ended up fine. It was a false alarm, but one of our next projects was setting up an alert software that would notify people on their desk phones if an issue like that came up again. I've dealt with emergencies like that in the past. Mock emergencies. Some were drills, some were real calls, but ended up being nothing. There was a couple active, we'll call them aggressor type situations that were called in that ended up being, we had like a bomb threat. Actually, we went through 2 bomb threat calls where we had to evacuate. And I ended up, the one time I ended up being in the part of the building where the PA system didn't reach. And I would have thought that there would be a way for somebody, like somebody's working the PA, somebody else should be on the phones, starting to call the dead areas maybe. I don't know. I don't know if there was a way to do an all call on all phones and have it come out almost like the intercom system. But yeah, it's a little weird when you have no idea what's going on where you are in the building and all of a sudden everything's quiet. Like you didn't hear the intercom, but you do notice that there's no murmuring, no footsteps, usually between classes, you'll hear the foot stomps on the floor above, things like that. And Yeah, it was a little unnerving. And then I opened the door and look out down the hallway, and there's just nothing. Now, once I started carrying a county radio in the school system, then anything and everything that happened, I would get notified one way or the other. So I felt a little more comfortable, but not everybody had a county radio. So I can sort of relate. It's got to be a little weird sitting at your desk and all of a sudden you realize nobody else is in the building or they're all piling out the fire exits. So yeah. New job role, mathematician? One from my education tech support days. 2 students walk up to the help desk, and I walk out to greet them and ask them what's going on. They told me they were having troubles doing a math test online. So I get them to open the laptop, log in, and show me what's going on. The website they use to do the tests will gray out the boxes or display an error on screen if the internet drops out or something fails to load. It happens once in a while, so I figured that was the issue. I pull the laptop towards me and type some numbers into the 2 boxes. It works and they're connected to the internet, so I ask them what the issue is, because as far as I can see, everything's working fine. They proceed to tell me that they didn't know the answer to the question, and neither did their substitute teachers, so they sent the students over to IT for help. They said their normal teacher didn't know the answer either when they were in class the day before, so they've come to us for the answer. I told the kids, this isn't IT related, so I can't help you. I asked who the teacher was. They didn't know the substitute, but I worked it out later on and sent them back. So I guess the school wanted me to add Maths Wizard to my long list of jobs that aren't my job, like coffee machine repairman, lockpicker, window repairman, and delivery boy. I've told you guys before, I don't really usually mind doing a few extra things. It kind of mixes up my day, breaks up the monotony, and keeps me a little more engaged. I don't know, ADHD maybe? I tend to like having things that will break things up like that, as long as the people that I work for don't assume that that should be expected to be part of my job. If I have time and I'm willing and feel like doing it, great. If not, you got to call somebody else. It's when they start assuming that you've done it before, so you really need to do it again. That kind of burns me up a little bit. And unfortunately, when you work in a school, medium-sized high school, a lot of the administration and teachers, if you've done something for them once, they assume that you're going to do it again. And you will do it right exactly when they need it done, not, after some other important thing that's actually your job gets done. So, yeah, that can get a little annoying. I find it strange that the teacher would send anybody to help desk for something that was software from whatever vendor the school system uses. I don't know. Just weird. Oh well. One-sided drama. I work as an IT tech for a local council who provides us to support the schools in the area. Been working for them a few years now, and while I was based at one site, I moved to the current site this year. I've been to the current site before to cover a coworker's holiday and worked on an ongoing issue here. The issue is with the drama room's interactive screen. It would only play sound out of one side. As stated, I've been here before, so I've already had a go at fixing it, as well as the 2 usual techs. At one point, the board's techs were called in to look and stated they would need to take the board off the wall to troubleshoot it. Yesterday, I decided to have a fresh go at it. Started going through the standard troubleshooting. Snugging and hugging in cables, verifying that sound output from the board comes out to one channel. Next, I started delving into the board settings, only to find audio options were almost non-existent, until I noticed 3 dots on the channel changer. Clicking it brought up the audio options, and what do I see? Balance set to max right. Really? Yes, really. I changed the balance settings back to middle, and there we go. My weird music taste blasting out of both speakers. All the hours wasted troubleshooting this board, internet searches, discussions on Teams, and outside texts. In the end, all it took was a fresh set of eyes and 1 setting change. I'm both proud of myself for fixing it and deeply ashamed for not spotting it before. I've had some soundboards before and audio interfaces. Like I use a USB audio interface. Take my XLR dynamic mic to the interface, which has some soundboard-like settings, for tone and balance and gain and all that stuff. And then it goes via USB to the laptop and transfers sound that way. And, I have a cheap, when I say cheap, I mean, probably a $70 or $80 Behringer interface. and it works great. I've never had a problem with like extra noise, things like that. Now, I don't use a condenser microphone. If I was using a condenser like one of those guys you hear doing voiceover work for cartoons, or sorry, my son-in-law hates when I call them cartoons, anime. Anyway, if I was one of those voiceover guys or an audiobook reader, although this mic works really well for audiobooks because you really don't need much. You kind of want that flat sound that a dynamic mic gives. So, I don't know. Anyway, see, sidetracked. Now, this board is marked very well. I have no problems. Now, sometimes I don't know what the setting means, but it is named. So then it's up to me to learn what does that setting name mean. But I've been on some expensive boards, like even a Mackie soundboard. If you've ever worked with a big giant, well, for me it was giant, 30-some channel Mackie soundboard for a small church. And there were actually buttons and slides on there that had absolutely zero label. Now, the slides I can understand not having labels because it just depends on what you're putting to them. Each slide volume knob is going to be whatever you send to it, whatever signal, whether it's, a singer, the preacher, the piano, the drums, guitar, whatever, you assign those. And we would put a strip of basically painter's tape along the bottom edge. And with Sharpie, thin Sharpie, I would mark what each of those channels did, what it controlled, because most of them were pretty constant every week. Then there were some open channels where if we had guest musicians, guest speakers, things like that, a new wireless mic, I could, plug it in and label it and be done. But yeah, it's got to be frustrating having all kinds of knobs and settings that have like zero labeling. I will say some of the software that I use, if I can't find something, I do poke around. When I see the 3 dots, it usually means there's a menu under there somewhere. So I will start poking around when I have something new. I just started editing a couple months back with DaVinci Resolve, which is a really high-grade video editor. But there are some things that are not labeled, and you got to poke around to find out what's what. But I can't blame the guy, when nobody else has found it, and sometimes your mind already has a preconceived notion of what it would possibly be, and sometimes you got to go back to simple stuff, Well, it sounds like maybe a fader. It's either a fader, or in my brain it would have been, like a missing cable or something, or everything's plugged into one side and it doesn't come out in both left and right channels, even if it's like, this is not a stereo microphone. I get it to come out both channels for you guys by the way I save it. Otherwise, it would only come out, I think, in the right channel of your earbuds or headphones. And I've messed that up a couple times saving the audio because, I was in a hurry or whatever, just being stupid. I don't know. It's always DNS, even if it absolutely shouldn't be. I used to do call center tech support for a major American ISP up until I quit back in August, after getting fed up with how much it felt like our policies were designed more to find excuses to avoid sending out a technician than to actually identify and find the solution for an issue. That was a long sentence. I was one of the few people there who actually had a technical background, and during my time there, I had a knack for identifying a lot more in-depth issues that very few people around the call center ever would have picked up on. Either because it wasn't in our troubleshooting script, or it was so many layers deep in the script that most people would give up and dismiss the issue out of hand as out of our scope of support. This is the case of the latter. This occurred about a month after I finished training, and I was working second shift at the time. Relatively early in my workday, around 4 p.m. I want to say, a call came in from a supervisor in our cable TV support department. He had taken an escalation from a customer who called in about an issue with his internet service, and it was clearly more in-depth than the basic troubleshooting his department handled. I let him know that I could take the call, and he transferred the caller on over to me. After taking the steps to verify the caller's identity, I asked him for some info on the situation. The gist was that he'd been unable to get online on his Mac, and he had just had a technician out. This technician basically just showed up, dismissed it as an issue with the customer's third-party router, and left. This caller wasn't having it, and called in stark raving mad and demanded to speak with a supervisor about it. I managed to de-escalate him a bit by assuring him that I was going to do some more in-depth troubleshooting, just to do my due diligence and identify if this issue truly was his router or if it was unrelated. Luckily, the caller had already bypassed his router and hooked his Mac directly up to his cable modem, which made things a lot easier. since we just had to verify whether it was an odd fault with the modem that the field tech had ignored or an issue with the customer's Mac. Since the basic steps of power cycling the modem and rebooting the desktop didn't do anything, and Safari would just stop responding whenever he tried to go onto a web page, I asked him to open up the terminal and ping 8.8.8.8, which went through just fine. I then had him try pinging google.com. No dice. Afterwards, I had him check the network settings to see what DNS settings were. It was set to manual configuration with a single IP address listed 127.0.0.1. Somehow, for some ungodly reason, this man's computer was configured to use its own loopback interface as its sole DNS server. I don't know how this happened. I'm not sure if I want to know how this happened, but it happened. From there, it was a quick case of advising him that he could either use something like Google DNS or Cloudflare DNS, or he could set it up to be configured automatically via DHCP. And he was on his way. The funny thing is, he assumed that I was a supervisor the entire time. It wasn't until the very end of the call that I told him that I was only a month out of training. This sounds like another case of the fresh pair of eyes kind of thing. You know, you're just a month out of training, but you're not tainted and bitter yet from all the other calls. And, you know, I find a lot of times when you're new to something, you're running other questions through your brain that more experienced people would just automatically dismiss because it's not the norm. I've had kids, you know, I'm troubleshooting something with a piece of power equipment, you know, a circular saw, and I think that, you know, sometimes the cord gets loose where it goes into the handle of your power tool, and a lot of times it just requires you to take the side of your casing apart and redo your wired connections from your power cord, and everything works fine after that. If it's not that, then the next step is to check your trigger, you know, make sure its connections are good and things like that. And, you know, I've had little kids come up to me and say, well, you know, what's this little screw thing on the side of the motor? You know, and it's a little cap with a slot in it that you can open up, and there's a spring and a brush in there for your motor. And they have no idea that it's a brush and what the brush in the motor does in most cases. So, but they ask the right questions, and all of a sudden it dawns on you that, you know, maybe the brushes are just old and nasty and need to be redone, or at least, you know, cleaned a little bit. So, yeah, sometimes if you clean the brushes, you can get a little more life out of it until you order the parts. At least you were able to stay level-headed and calm this guy down and, you know, get him to listen, and you listen to each other so that things could actually get resolved. That's the key. Both parties have to be, you know, chill and willing to listen to each other and try things in order to make sure. Anyway. Impromptu tech support at the bar. This may not exactly qualify as tech support, but I'll give it a shot. I'll state that I've been working in tech support since the mid-'80s, so I used some valuable skills, mainly bullshitting a client in this situation. The scene. A crowded bar. A good friend was dating the owner, so I went with her to his bar to watch the Super Bowl. At the time, this was one of the few bars with a big screen TV, so the bar, while smaller and a little out of the way, was a bit more crowded than usual, but not mind-numbingly overfilled like damn near any bar is on Super Bowl Sunday. As it was, some idiot got a hold of the only remote and kept effing with the volume. Up, down, too loud, too soft, he just couldn't control it. The beer was flowing and everyone was getting angrier and angry at this guy, to the point I think someone, not me, was going to throw him out the window. Fortunately, the time came when the beers took on its effect and the guy put the remote down to head to the bathroom. The bar breathed a sigh of relief when a thought came to me. I picked up the remote, adjusted the volume to something reasonable, took out the batteries, put them in my pocket, and put the remote back down. I think the bar realized what was happening because the chatter seemed to pick up a bit as he returned from the head. After a few moments, he picked up the remote, pointed it at the TV, and was clearly pushing a button. It came time to bullshit him now. "Perfect," I yelled out after a moment or two, and he put the remote down. 5 minutes or so later, he picked it up, started pushing a button, and someone else had caught on. "Perfect," someone else yelled. This went on for the rest of the game, with eventually damn near the entire bar yelling, "Perfect," after this guy picked up the remote. I returned the batteries to the bar owner sometime in the fourth quarter. By bullshit a client, I don't mean lie to them. I mean play a little fast and loose with the truth to tell them what they want to hear, while doing what absolutely needs to be done to get the issue fixed. You know, the client says the problem is X, and doesn't want to hear anything else, but you know it's Y. And when they see you did something that wouldn't fix X, you tell them it was actually Y, but an adjusted setting at X would help prevent a recurrence. You know the drill. You bullshit them. So I mentioned earlier that I've done sound for a church before, and working the sound, a lot of times the worship leader, who's also a lead guitarist by trade and whatever, tends to really want their monitor, whether it's a floor monitor or in-ear monitor, to be very clear and much ahead of everybody else's. When it's a floor monitor, which is basically just a speaker turned around facing the musicians, when the wall behind them is solid wood, you got to be careful how loud you make the monitors, because that sound all reflects back into the audience or the congregation in this point. And every week he would get my mix all screwed up because he wanted his monitor louder and louder and louder. And I told him, I said, I can't do that. I'm getting yelled at by everybody by making your monitor louder, and all they can hear is your guitar. They can't even hear you sing. And so one day, the bass player ran the soundboard pretty much by himself before we started doing, dedicated sound guys. And the bass player came up. He set the whole system up, so he knew what was up. He was also really good friends with the lead guitarist. So he would come up to me, and one Sunday when the lead guitarist says, need more monitor, and he was starting to get really cranky, and that's a bad way to be right before the service, getting yourself all knotted up and in a bad way. So the bassist comes up, and he tells the guitarist, hold on, chill out for a second. He comes up to me in the booth, and he says, here's how you handle this. He puts his finger out on the button, and he was making eye contact with the lead guitarist, and the lead guitarist is, pluck, 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 pluck on his guitar, and then all of a sudden he would give a thumbs up. Meanwhile, the bassist, who was showing me what was up, hadn't turned a thing. He just had his finger sitting on it. So he said, do you understand? And I said, I was sort of half lost, but I got what he did. So I said, yes. A couple of Sundays goes by, and I'm back in the booth again. And sure enough, he starts with the whole monitor thing. Well, the monitor adjustments hadn't changed. The only thing that's changed is, he's unplugged his guitar 2 weeks ago, and he brought it back in this week, and he's plugged it in, and something feels different to him. I think it was his hearing, quite honestly. But anyway, so, and there's also a difference when there's a crowd in the room and when the room is empty. When you set up your sound and the room's empty, everything's going to sound weird, especially if you're standing on stage. And then all of a sudden you got a room full of people and everything sounds a little bit different. So as soon as he started the old, more monitor, I just put my finger on there and make eye contact and just wait. And he'd go pluck, 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 pluck. And he'd go, perfect. And I would take my finger off the button. So, sometimes you just, what needs to be done. And I don't know if anybody else does, but I get a little pang of guilt when I have to do that, because I really don't like BSing people. I'm not a super forward guy, but I really don't want to, I want to tell the truth. I want everything to be above board, honest and all that. But sometimes you just gotta. Speaking of guilt, did you know we make soap? Handmade, mostly natural soap. And when I say mostly natural, I mean we use some fragrance oils, and we use really high quality fragrance oils, so they're not dangerous to you skin-wise, breathing-wise, irritation, all that stuff. In fact, a lot of these fragrances are actually safer than actual essential oils, which so many people think they can drink essential oils. No, don't do that. Anyway, while our soap won't wash the guilt away, it will make you feel a little better and make you smell fantastic when you've had a shower with Uncle Jon soap. So do me a favor, if you're feeling a little guilty, and the holidays are coming up, so who doesn't have a little bit of guilt coming? Do me a favor, check out our website right down here and order yourself some soap. I mean, we've got like 20 some cents to choose from, different packages, 3 bars, 6 bars, single bars, a whole loaf of soap if you want. If you like a certain scent, and even if you've never had this one scent before, but you think you're really going to like it, go ahead and order a loaf. It's more economical, and you get to enjoy it through half the year. And it's all guilt-free. All right, guys. Till the next video, we'll see you.